thank you. All right, I'm gonna just get my screen sharing going here. Well, thanks a lot for joining us today. We would like to take some time with Citizens Climate Lobby, and we're going to talk about business opportunities that can come from climate action. We were asked to speak about investment opportunities created by the transition to clean energy. And we will be doing that through talking about a model that looks at how we can transition through a model that shows how there are different opportunities to participate in this way. So we would love to invite anyone who has questions to just go ahead and ask those questions as we go along, and we will we'll cover those as we go. So a little bit about myself. I've been with Citizens Climate Lobby for 12 years. I started the first chapter in Utah, which was the 12th at the time. And now we have 435 chapters nationally and 205,000 supporters. So right now I'm just going into a quick overview about Citizens Climate Lobby, and then we'll dive into looking at different a model that shares different approaches that can help us accomplish staying below 2 degrees Celsius. So I've been the Mountain West Regional Coordinator since 2013. And this is an organization that has grown considerably over these years. We now, with 205,000 supporters, we are working to continually build political will for action on climate. So what we do as an organization, our specific focus is trying to empower individuals to advocate for systemic change. We are always focused on solutions that make the biggest difference in reducing carbon emissions. And what we're wanting to talk with you today about is how we can, you can help assist us in being businesses that can lobby and have an opportunity for community leaders to take action. So a little bit about CCL. We're an international organization, so we're really focused on getting support across the entire world for action on climate. Specifically, we've been focused on a carbon price, and I'll talk about that here in a moment. But the things that I really wanted to highlight here again is that we are international. We are nonpartisan because we know that in order for us to pass and have durable solutions to the climate issue, that we need to continually be working to have support come from both sides of the aisle, knowing that legislation is much more durable than executive orders and other regulations that are things that move and shift depending on who is in power politically. So we are really focused in that area. And we are also, as I said, we're focused on the most effective solution out there, which has been carbon themed dividend, which is a price on carbon emissions. And I'll explain that here in just a moment. But we, as an organization, really pride ourselves on being for something and to be really working on building relationships with all members of Congress, in that we know that as we develop these relationships and we come from a place of respect and appreciation, that these are ways that we can really help build connections between each other and ideally bring both parties together to address an issue that will continue to impact us. And since we know that the party in power will always be changing, there's a huge value to advocating for solutions that are bipartisan. I'm going to just do a quick explanation about carbon pricing and what we've been advocating for. And so we have been advocating for what's called the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act. And the way it works is you place a gradually increasing fee on carbon emissions at the source. So that means money placed at the mine, well, or port of entry. So the price on pollution is assessed as far upstream as possible before the fuel is transported to market. So the energy producer, the manufacturer would be paying more for their energy because of the price placed on carbon emissions at the source. All the money that would be collected on the price on carbon emissions would be collected into a pool and then distributed back to households equally. So that is through a dividend check. And that the idea here is we as an organization are always focused on a solution that can help get us to 2 degrees, down to 2 degrees or lower Celsius. But it also, we want it to be sure that it protects the low and middle income households. And for that reason, all the money that would be collected through this legislation would be distributed back to households equally. 2/3 of households would do better or break even from the money that they receive in a dividend in relation to their increased fuel costs. The third leg to this approach is border carbon adjustments. And the way that is designed is that we want to be sure to protect American manufacturers. So the way that is done is imagine that there's a price on carbon emissions in the United States. In order to prevent, so if there's a price on carbon emissions in the United States. Oh, okay, I think we got it muted there. So if a country that does not have a comparable carbon price is shipping products to the United States and the United States has a carbon price, then the border carbon adjustment would apply it's essentially a tariff, which would level the playing field between manufacturers in the United States and manufacturers in other countries, so that the price on carbon in the United States, that where American manufacturers have been paying more for their energy, the tariff levels that playing field so that manufacturers in other countries would be assessed that tariff when the product came into the United States. And the conversely, products made in the US being shipped out of country to a country that doesn't have a carbon price would be rebated for the amount of extra cost they paid for the cost on fuel. The power of this type of legislation is that it creates the incentive for other countries to want to implement their own carbon price, because all we're looking for is to have a comparable carbon price between countries, and that creates the incentive to harmonize carbon pricing around the world. So the things to keep in mind with carbon pricing is that it's very direct and transparent because the price is applied at the source, so there's less point sources to monitor, and that you pay for what you pollute. This is a market-based solution, and it's economy-wide. So it's really designed to help thrive innovation and not pick winners or losers. The idea is to set a market signal and let the economy do the work. Again, the dividend protects the low and middle income households from those increasing costs. So that's a quick overview of carbon pricing and about Citizens Climate Lobby. And I know the focus for today is on ways that we can address this issue with different types of solutions. And I am going to pass it on to Mark Peterson, who is our host who's calling in from Salt Lake City to run through some modeling that talks about carbon pricing and other solutions, business solutions that can have a great impact on this issue. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to you, Mark.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Can everyone hear me? A nod of the head. Am I coming through? Okay, so I'm Mark Peterson. I retired from General Electric as an executive after spending 30 years in the electrical generation industry. The first part of that time, I dealt with fossil fuels. Second part, I dealt with renewables. I can go deep into any of those technologies or the feasibility or the economics of any of those technologies. We're not really going to get into that in this discussion. But what I am going to show you or talk about, let me share that screen. Can everyone see the chart that says En-ROADS?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So En-ROADS is a model, a system model that allows us to look at the impact of different solutions actually on temperature change over a period of years. But it also allows us a really good insight into where investment opportunities will occur as we go through an energy transition. And I'll explain that as we go through it. So let me explain the overview of the model a little bit, and then we'll get into, I'll go directly into this CCL approach or a carbon fee approach. And then we'll look at what else needs to be done, but also try and point out investment opportunities as we go through that. So since we don't have an awful lot of people on, like 15 people, I always like to say, if you have a question, raise your hand, come off of mute, say something, or you can use the function to raise your hand. So if you have a comment, a question, and or just want to tell me that I don't have a clue of what I'm talking about, that's okay too. You can push back and we'll discuss that. All right, so an overview of this model, right? So it was developed at MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. About 13 years or so ago, it was a doctoral project. They kicked it off. They started, some of those folks left and created Climate Interactive, which is a think tank in North Carolina. It's still being developed. There's new updates that come out all the time. And so it's not part of CCL. It's a third-party independent model that lets us do this analysis. So this is a dashboard, or what they call the dashboard, right? And in the upper left corner is the default chart of global sources of primary energy. And the colors here, I don't know if you can read them, but the brown is coal, red is oil, blue is gas, renewables are green, and then we have some bioenergy that is pink, and then just a little bit of nuclear. This is today's worldwide state. This is what the supply of energy looks like today. On the right side, I've changed this default to do a temperature change chart because I think it shows a little bit better of what I'm trying to talk about. So, but what this says, if we do nothing, if we continue on the current state as we are today, we will have by the year 2100, a 3.6 degrees C temperature increase in US terms. That's 6.5 degree temperature increase on average. And the on average is important because temperature rise doesn't occur the same everywhere. There are hot spots and there are not so hot spots. But what I want to also show is that, so this dashboard is fairly intuitive, fairly user-friendly, unless you want to get real deep. And so all of these areas you can click on from this fast chart, look at it from all kinds of different angles, right, on both sides here. And then if that's not enough, if you go to the graphs, you can look at it from all kinds of different angles. And if that's not enough, you can go to the simulation and go down and change the assumptions if you think that you're smart enough to change the assumptions of the model. I'm not, so I don't generally change those assumptions. So the rest of this is sliders, right? And so within energy supply, we can increase or decrease any of these sliders, and it impacts or it changes the impact of the sources of energy as well as the temperature change over time. Oh, I forgot to say that, so some folks say that trying to forecast to the year 2100 is not realistic. That's way too far in the future. I'm going to make an argument that that the real transition is going to occur way before then, and so it just won't matter. I'm also going to make an argument, we'll see how successful I am, that the sources of energy don't matter as long as they all emit zero CO2. Okay, I'll come back to that. All right, so there's all these sliders and everything. And in addition to these categories, there's the 3 dots that allow you to go into the area, each area, and get more specific. I'm going to do that actually on carbon price. Then we can look at transportation, buildings and industry growth. I probably won't because that's somewhat politically sensitive, but we can. And then we can look at land and industry emissions and carbon removal. Okay, so again, what I'm stating is that this will be, as we transition to clean energy, this is likely to be the biggest investment opportunity since the start of the Industrial Revolution, since the start of electricity. And so anytime this changes, there's investment opportunities, and I'll get into that a little bit more. So carbon price, I'm going to go in and put in the carbon price that CCL has been proposing, and then we'll look at the impact of that. So we're arguing we would start at $15 a ton. We're arguing we would start that year in 2022. We're saying that it's going to take 1 year to achieve that initial price. And then the final price, I'm going to put in as $315 a ton. So this is starting at 15 and then escalating at $10 a ton for 30 years. So I know that takes us to 2053. I could back it off. I'm arguing 2053 is close enough. So the years to achieve the final price, again, that's where I say 30. And I need to start achieving that in 2022. Okay, so that creates this chart down here that says, all right, we're going to start this in 2022, and then we're going to escalate at $10 a year over time, and it's going to peak out at 2053. Okay, so just that carbon price approach decreased. We started clean at a, if we do nothing, we'll have a 3.6 degrees C rise over that time period by 2100. By doing the carbon price, we decreased that to 2.6 degrees C. Still didn't hit the 2 degrees C Paris Climate Accord target, so we got to do more stuff. And because I've done this a few times, I'm going to next look at methane. And within methane, I am going to turn on the detailed settings, and it allows me to look at a few different areas. So first, I'm going to say that agricultural and waste emissions, right? So it turns out that beef cattle pass gas and they pass methane, and it's a fairly big deal. So I don't eat beef, but I don't expect everybody else in the world not to eat beef. But I do expect there is a change in feed that we can feed the beef that significantly reduces emissions. And then this also looks at agriculture. There are also different processes of farming the land where you lose less CO2 and actually you capture CO2. And so I'm going to say that we can achieve a 50% reduction from agriculture by doing those things. And then this next line says energy and industry emissions. And this is methane leaks from pipelines, methane leaks from chemical processes. And I'm going to say that we're going to put a lot of effort into this, and we're going to fix all those leaks. And we're going to significantly decrease the methane that leaks from industrial sources. Okay, that takes us to 2.3 degrees C. We're still not quite there at the 2 degrees C. So the next biggest impact that I've found is, or I should say, in methane, right? So as we're looking at this, so there are investment opportunities in the feed for cattle. There are investment opportunities in the changes of farming techniques. And there are absolutely investment opportunities in decreasing the leaks in pipelines and then chemical processes. Okay, so next biggest thing, which isn't that big, but it still has an impact. We're going to electrify transportation. So we're already on the road there. This doesn't have to have a lot of push. All of the major manufacturers are already moving to electrify their fleets of cars that they offer by 2025, so maybe 2030, maybe 2035, but in that time frame. And so that's already has a great deal of incentive behind it. Okay, that took us down to 2.1 degrees C. Next one, I'm going to electrify buildings and industry. That's a little bit bigger of a putt. We would need incentives and or legislation to move towards electrifying buildings and industry in a rapid manner. And so that's going to take a little bit of work. But that hits us to the 2.0 degrees C Paris Climate Accord target, but we can do better than that. And the next biggest impact is technological. And this is actually a technology that sucks the CO2 out of the air, sequesters that CO2. This is not a new technology. There is a plant functioning now in Iceland where it does exactly that. So we don't have to invent the technology, but we do have to create some incentives so that folks find a reason to do it, right? There's investments behind it and there's a return for those investments. But I'm going to say that if we do have high growth and we highly incentivize people to do that and we pay them for taking carbon out of the air, then we can get to this 1.5 degrees C mythical target that people say is unachievable right now. This also obviously is an investment area in this technology to take CO2 out of the air and sequester it. And we need to expand that worldwide. And so there's a huge investment opportunity there. All right, so I hit the 1.5 degrees C. What I want to point out here, and then I'll stop for a second for questions. So I said pay attention to what the chart was to start. This is how it was. And this looked at the different technologies that were being used to supply the energy today. And now that has changed. It's changed to primarily renewables with a little nuclear, but it didn't completely lock out fossil fuels. There is some fossil fuels there. So let me go into an area that talks about new zero carbon technologies. I understand, I think it is John is going to talk about hydrogen or green hydrogen later on, right? And so let's say that green hydrogen is rapidly spread across the world and becomes a major source of energy technology. And so this new zero carbon, we just increase that dramatically. And actually, whether it's carbon or hydrogen or let's say fission, right? Didn't change the output. The output is still 1.5 degrees C. All it did was change the mix, but it created another huge investment opportunity in any new technology that we create that has zero carbon output. So let me back that off and say some folks are in favor of nuclear, some folks are not in favor of nuclear, but if we highly subsidize nuclear, it doesn't change the output. We're still at 1.5 degrees C, but it changes the mix of the supply. Right? So yes, John, you have to come off mute and ask. I was hoping you would ask. You're not, you're still on mute.
Hi, Mark.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting charts. I've never seen this kind of analysis before. And this is going out pretty far to 2100. And I've done some work with some nuclear fusion companies, the private nuclear fusion companies that are coming on stream. There's about 30 of them now. And they expect to be producing electricity by 2030 or 2035, 2040, which is well before your 2100 number. And I'm wondering if when you say nuclear, are you including nuclear fusion in those comments or just fission?
So let me make two comments from there. So I started out by saying that this goes to the year, and let me go to the freshman, right? It goes to the year 2100. And I said, I'm going to point out that won't be relevant. And yeah, 2100 is way too far to forecast. You can't have any high degree of certainty. But when we made all of these changes, now the blue curve starts to change and peak at about 2040. And then as we take CO2 out of the air through this technology to do that, it actually goes down from there. So, you know, forecasting to 2040 is not such a big deal. So, and when I do talk about nuclear, I was talking about conventional nuclear today, but it really doesn't matter because you can put nuclear fission in either nuclear or new carbon. Really doesn't matter. Whichever it is, if you increase it, it really doesn't change the output because we were already, all of our energy was coming from zero CO2 sources. So if you add a new zero CO2 source, and it is cost effective, right? And then in this case, as cost effective as renewables, all it does is change the input source. It allows for a new investment area, but all it does is change the input source, right? So, and that's why I started out, or I tried to make the argument starting saying that the technologies used to generate energy don't matter as long as they emit zero CO2, right? So if they all emit zero CO2, then it purely becomes a which is the least cost approach or the best cost approach. And but you can also carry that argument into fossil fuels, right? So the technology to capture carbon out of the exhaust of fossil fuels, and you know, primarily coal or natural gas, that's existed for decades. We don't have to invent anything new there. We need to perfect it. It's been at about 70% capable for a few decades. I know that they're trying to push it to 90%. Really needs to go to 100% to be most effective. But once you capture it and you sequester it, if you can do that cost effectively, then fossil fuels are fine. As long as they are zero CO2 emissions. Okay, so I wanted to stop there and ask you if I covered a lot. I talked fast. I did a whole lot of things, and I think it's time for people to push back and tell me I don't know what I'm talking about.
I have questions. It's Gabriela.
Yes, good, Gabriela.
I work a lot in mining. And so how optimistic you are to arrive to those numbers, to decrease the temperature? How optimistic? Because it depends on what I see, it depends on the combination of what you decrease or increase. And according to the combination is the temperature, if it goes down and how much. So first, my first question, how optimistic you are about this?
Yeah.
And the second is, what is the combination that you think is the best one and the one that would work for?
Let me approach that from a couple of points. So first, I am an En-ROADS ambassador, which means I've gone through the training to be able to do this, right? I broke all kinds of rules. I did not follow the official rules from En-ROADS as an ambassador. The official rules are saying that you bring this up, you describe the dashboard, and then you spend time to ask people, what would you do? And let's look at the differences. And I didn't do that because we don't have time to do that. So with that disclaimer, how optimistic am I? Well, with regard to a carbon price, we were within one vote in the US Senate of having a carbon price attached, and the Build Back Better plan passed in February of this year, right? That exploded, didn't happen, not going to happen. At times, there's been discussion that a carbon price will try to be attached with a new reconciliation package that is likely to occur mid-year. That may or may not occur. If it doesn't occur, then it's likely to be credits for no carbon energy production. And if that's the case, the carbon price doesn't pass, then Citizens Climate Lobby will move on to, okay, what's the next best thing to happen, right? So in doing these, I made the assumption we were going to pass a carbon price. I made the assumption that we were going to go in and be able to address methane. That's going to take a little bit of work. It's not a certainty, but it'll take some work. I made the assumption we were going to be able to highly incentivize this technology to pull carbon out of the air, which creates this downward slope here, right? That's why it goes down. We're actually pulling carbon out of the air. You know, the probability that worldwide we're going to pass that type of legislation to encourage that, that may be a little bit bigger of a putt, but it's certainly doable. And then the electrification of transportation, I don't think much more needs to be done there, with the exception of big trucks and airplanes and boats and or ships at sea. And I would argue that actually hydrogen is more likely to be the technology there, but it needs some incentivization and needs to be incentivized to do it. Electrification of buildings and industry, a bit more of a putt. It certainly will require some work. So how optimistic am I? Is this a done deal? Absolutely not. Is it going to take an awful lot of work for people to push to make it happen? Absolutely. Is it going to be easy to do? Absolutely not. Is there going to be significant pushback in that battle? Absolutely, but doesn't mean we still can't go for it. Did I answer that okay?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But as I told you, I work in the mining sector, and
Well,
I
let
don't know
me
if we
say,
will have all the minerals for the electrification and the batteries. That's a debate. I don't want to do a debate now, but that's a debate if we will have all the minerals.
yeah, no, yes, and the mineral mix is changing, but yes, it's a big issue. But also mining, you're right, a lot of those minerals required for the batteries need to be mined, and it creates a huge growth opportunity for mining, but it is different than the current mining,
Yeah.
right? Obviously, coal mining is going to take a big hit, but lithium mining is going to explode.
Yeah, and it's a different way of exploiting the mines, these minerals.
Which I also should say or point out again that this energy production transition, again, here we are today. All these folks are, the coal, the oil, the gas, and even the bioenergy, right? There's people making money there. They've got assets that they need to depreciate and get money out of. When you transition to this type of supply, it's a pretty big deal. And there are folks that have jobs now that won't have jobs then, that we need to find a way to take care of. And we need to find a way to help them through an energy transition. Whenever there is this huge of a transition, whether it's energy or any sector, there's huge opportunities for huge business opportunities for investments and returns. There's also huge people issues that need to be addressed. Okay.
Yeah.
Any other pushback questions?
My last question is this a public database? Do we have access, or it's?
Yes. And you can get there. You don't need to put in this, this code here. You can get there by En-ROADS, en-roads.org. And it'll come up, you do that, enroads.org, it'll come up to this screen. And then you just click on Explore the En-ROADS Simulator. Right here.
Okay.
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 And it will default, let me open one. So it will default
En-ROADS, okay.
to, it comes up with a disclaimer you have to, okay. It'll default to this and it defaults to this chart, greenhouse gas net emissions. I don't like that because it doesn't necessarily support, doesn't show the story that I'm trying to tell, right? So to get to the temperature, I come down here to impacts, and then I click temperature change. But as I did that, you saw all the way through that there were all kinds of different ways all kinds of different charts that you can look at.
Thank you.
And change those impacts. Okay, so let me say also, if you would explored some of these impact areas, one is sea level rise. If you went and did that even though we can hit this 1.5 degrees C change, the sea level is going to rise. We're not going to be able to stop sea level rise. It's going to happen, and that will mean economic impact and people impact from low-lying areas where, you know, folks are going to have to leave those areas.
So Mark,
we'll have to help them in some way. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Just going to say we're kind of near the end of our time on this section. So is there any wrap up that you'd like to offer before we move forward?
So if I have more time, sometimes I go into more sensitive areas, and I'll just do a few really quick ones. Like, so energy efficiency. I do we built a house about 3 years ago. We over insulated it. Everything is, all the lights are LED. All of my yard equipment is battery powered. I have an electric car. I have an induction cooktop. All of that stuff is really feel good. It creates the right energy, thought energy for everyone else to jump on board there. But actually, if you just increase energy efficiency, it does nothing. Energy efficiency is not the solution to climate change. That's sometimes politically more sensitive. And usually I get into bigger discussion there, but same with buildings and industry, just doesn't do that. And so my argument here is, and this is a capitalistic argument, right? If all of your sources of energy are not emitting any CO2, right? All the sources have zero CO2 emissions. It doesn't matter how much energy you use. And with that sensitive statement, unless there's pushback on that, I'll give it back to Bill.
I'll just come in. Can I just comment? Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
This is a really fascinating pictorial and analysis of how we can have an impact. It sort of strikes me that it's a little bit like econometrics. You're trying to predict, you know, you push down here and it comes up here. Yes. And it's impacted by so many different things. Technology will be a big one, yes. and politics and yes. Taxation and so forth. So I would imagine that if you did a longitudinal study of this over time, that the picture would look quite a bit different every year or every 5-year period, because so many things change in the economy. Yes, that is producing these outputs.
Yes, yes, and as a matter of fact, when I first started doing this a couple of years ago, the end target, if we do nothing, was 4.2 degrees C rise, and so they've adapted it and moved it down to 3.6 because of things that have already occurred. But somewhere else, so there is a place that I could go to, but I'd have to think about how to get there, where it shows at this point in time, this is what we forecast, and then this is what happened during that time period. And so you can go back in time and look at those to see if, you know, is the model relevant? Is it close to being accurate? And they track that all the time, but absolutely, at any time in the future, whatever has occurred between now and then will change the output of this model.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Mark. We're going to have to move on to the panel discussion now, but really appreciate you taking the time to cover that for us. And just last thing that I just wanted to share as far as what Citizens Climate Lobby is working on is, you know, what can we do as businesses, community leaders? So the things that I want to suggest folks to do as business leaders is to be talking about how to raise public awareness about the impacts of climate, but more specifically pivoting to talking about solutions. We really find that the most effective thing is to really move into the solutions part of climate, because we know that we've come a long way as far as an understanding that, you know, we may not know exactly how much of an impact we're having on climate, or there's a disagreement about that, but we can all agree on the fact that there are solutions that can help move us forward on that. So as business leaders, we encourage you to contact and lobby your government representatives. You know, this is a system solution. So we're trying to help move the conversation by having business leaders contact government representatives to share that this is an important thing for them, and also to share that there is a positive economic impact through a price on carbon emissions. And with that conclusion, I'm going to pass it on to Rhonda.
Hi all, we're playing musical chairs a little bit, so bear with us for a second. I have the opportunity to introduce you to a couple gentlemen, both with the name John and Cesar. If you have the opportunity after they both sort of make their opening statement to maybe do a dual screen, it would be great for some Q&A. But let me first tell you about our first speaker, John Martinson. I've known John for a long time. He is the tea guy. He is one of the co-founders of China Mist Tea Company that's based here in Arizona and sold it a few years back. And in 2016, he earned his Executive Master of Sustainability Leadership from ASU School of Sustainability. And I love this in his bio. My philosophy is that of natural capitalism, promoting the protection and sustainability of nature's ecosystem services. So natural capital through market-based solutions supported by appropriate policy. So he's a blogger on sustainability. He's an influencer in the electrical vehicle adoption and EV road tripping areas. He's also an executive producer and member of the Advisory Council for the American Resilience Project. And he's a steward for the McDowell Sonoran Conservancy. He's gonna share some insights that he has about what he thinks we have as far as opportunities within the market. So John, if you wanna come and grab a seat and share with us.
Greetings. The transportation sector, which at 27% generates the largest share of greenhouse gas emissions. This includes cars, trucks, ships, trains, and planes. I'm here to talk briefly today about two issues related to transportation electrification, a necessary revolution that will help mitigate climate change by substantially reducing these emissions. These two strategies are the electrification of corporate vehicle fleets and providing electric vehicle charging to support EV adoption by employees, guests, and customers who live in multi-unit dwellings. Both are necessary to drive the transition to transportation electrification, and both are good for business. So briefly about the business case for fleet vehicle electrification. Fuel savings represents 60% of a fleet's total cost of ownership. And electrification provides fleet managers with substantial savings opportunities, as an ICE, internal combustion engine vehicle, travels 9 miles for $1 of fuel, and an EV travels 25 miles for $1 of electricity. Also, electricity is a more stable source of energy with long-term costs that are much easier to predict than gasoline or diesel. At work charging, having the chargers at work to charge your okay about that, folks.
Sorry, John. I'm just going to ask Cesar if you can pin the Bill Barron video instead of Mark, then John will be highlighted.
So for at-work charging, fleet drivers always start the day fully charged from installed level 2 electric vehicle chargers. Typically, these chargers deliver 208/240 volts of electricity to the vehicle battery at a rate of 3 to 7 kilowatts and provide 8 to 20 miles of driving range per hour of charging. These technologies are improving those speeds and amount. Workplace level 2 chargers cost approximately $6,000 installed. Next, reduced maintenance costs. Electric vehicles are inherently more reliable than ICE vehicles due to fewer mechanical parts, prone to failure, and often provide better data to enable more proactive maintenance. For an example, I drive a 2018 Tesla Model 3, requires no periodic service short of a cabin air filter replacement, which is a 10-minute procedure conducted once a year, periodic tire rotation, and replacement of tires and windshield wiper blades when needed. With one pedal driving, the use of regenerative braking brakes last much longer than ICE vehicles. So I have about 40,000 miles on my car right now. I just had Tesla take a look at my brakes. They said they look brand new. Reputation enhancement. Position your company as an innovative, environmentally friendly brand with quantifiable reductions in your carbon footprint for corporate social responsibility. And just a note here, research by Centrica Business Solutions is estimated that 77% of all fleet owners intend to adopt EV in the next 5 years. Next is for people who live in single-family homes, transitioning to EVs is relatively easy. One needs to install a level 2 charging port in your garage, and your electric vehicle is fully charged overnight with enough range for your daily commute and errands. However, potential EV adopters who live in multi-unit dwellings are at a disadvantage, as most apartment buildings and condo complexes have few, if any, EV chargers. These owners, these potential EV owners, are forced to seek out public chargers to serve their charging needs and may be frustrated at the lack of availability and the time it takes to achieve a full charge, thus substantially slowing the greater adoption of electric vehicles. This is where the gap exists, and there's great opportunity in there. By providing chargers if you have a business, by providing chargers at your place of business, you can support employees and customers and thus help scale the transition to electric vehicle adoption. So here are the business benefits for potential benefits of such an action. One, increase employee satisfaction by providing your employees with EV charging, either as an amenity or at cost. They can return home from their commute with enough charge to top it off. It will take less time and effort. Providing EV charging also provides greater appeal to potential new recruits. Next, improve customer experience, commerce, and brand loyalty by implementing an EV charging infrastructure. Consumer-facing businesses, particularly retailers and leisure companies, can monetize their EV charging facilities to create a new income stream. When I go road tripping in my car, I search for hotels, inns, bed and breakfasts, and restaurants on my route with available destination charging. I'm brand loyal to those who provide those charging. And it also improves health and safety through better local air quality and localized exposure to pollutants. This is also a great opportunity here. Getting chargers into multi-unit dwellings. Most multi-unit dwellings or MUDs provide a small number of chargers, and the owners of electric vehicles in those locations are essentially fighting for those spots. But if you could build the infrastructure into the dwellings themselves so that everybody who has an assigned space has a charger, that I think is a huge opportunity. So, and finally, by providing leadership in offering EV charging infrastructure and transitioning fleets to EVs, businesses can play a major role in reducing global greenhouse gas emissions and inspiring wider EV adoption across society.
Done?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, let's switch places for just a second. Okay, so we're going to get into hello, can you hear me? Because it's saying unmute myself.
You've heard through the.
Oh, got it. Sorry. By the way, I never introduced myself. My name is Rhonda Barnard. I'm here as a volunteer for CCL, new to their volunteer corps, and just happy to be a part of this. I've also done a little innovation and started up a nonprofit to build an ecosystem of environmental and climate-focused nonprofits across the country and hopefully globally. I want to give a thanks before I introduce the second John Cook, to the Global Chamber for hosting us, for the Asian Leadership Organization for being a co-host, and the Black Chamber of Arizona for also hosting us, as well as Gretchen from CCL, volunteer extraordinaire. So thank you, Gretchen, for all that you do. So this bio, it's like, I've got the tea guy who's my friend, but now I'm like, I want this other John is the one I want to have a tea with to learn more about. He's coming in here from Zurich, pretty far away from Arizona, where we're based. So John Cook is the chairman of Rock Lake Advisors. He founded it in 2009, and he's had a massive career in international business and financial services. He hails from Chicago, Milwaukee area, and he has spent the last 40 years living in Europe, and his prior positions include all kinds of leadership roles with companies that I can pronounce and companies that I can't pronounce. So I'll offer up just a few: W.J. Hopper and Company, the Security Pacific Merchant Bank, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch International, and International Harvester. He serves on a multitude of boards, and he is, in the building that we're standing in, Chairman Emeritus of the Thunderbird Global Private Equity Center, which is a thought leadership platform he founded at this school in 2004. And he's been awarded many accolades over his time. And I don't want to keep going with the bio. You can certainly look up anything about these two amazing gentlemen named John. I want to just pass it on to John Cook so that he can tell you more about the innovations and things that he's seeing and what he's working on. So John, take it away.
Let me come off of mute here. Thank you very much, Rhonda. That was an introduction that I don't deserve. I've just kept busy my whole life. This is a great forum. Thanks to Doug and Cesar for putting this together. I've not been a regular speaker or participant in Global Chamber events, but after having seen the material and presentations that we've seen so far on this one, I'm going to be a lot more active. It's like going back to the classroom. So Rock Lake Associates, or Rock Lake Advisors, is a firm that raises capital for projects that we believe in. We connect investors with projects and projects or funds with investors. And totally the numbers are quite large, but we also work on smaller projects. Let's see. The one that we're here to talk about right now that we're engaged in is a step that Mark, I think, missed in his journey of moving us to the hydrogen economy. And he said I would be speaking later about hydrogen innovations. I'm not speaking about hydrogen innovations. I'm speaking about ammonia. Ammonia is a product. It's a chemical that we're all familiar with because we use it in our homes for cleaning. It's used in refrigeration. It's used in fertilizer, which is about 85% of the use of ammonia since the last 100 years. But now with certain sort of macro forces that are coming upon us because of the problems that Mark outlined and I would like to see, Mark, if there was a way to include ammonia in the charts that you presented. So ammonia is a chemical that has never been used as a sustainable fuel in the past. But now with so many incentives and need for zero CO2 emissions, scientists and engineers have suddenly realized that ammonia can provide power to ships and planes and power stations, and it can be used for the transport of hydrogen. It's the best way to transport hydrogen from Texas to New York. And so the demand for hydrogen should be looked at sort of in a historical and then future near-term future scenario. About 180 million metric tons are produced currently, and in about 10 years they're going to need about 600 million. And there's no way that industry can produce enough power plants to produce enough ammonia to meet the demand that's going to be extant in 10 years. There are several processes, basically 3 processes to produce ammonia. One is gray ammonia, which has been used for 100 years and it's polluting. When you go through the reformation process, you emit CO2 into the atmosphere, which is not needed. And gray ammonia cannot be used in engines of ships and planes and trains and as a power, or you just create more CO2 emissions. I'm happy to say that we're working intensively on one of the first blue ammonia production plants, which is going to be built in the state of Louisiana. Louisiana and Texas are the most perfect locations in the entire world to produce to sequester CO2, because they have so many empty underground caverns where there was oil and it's now been pumped out using hyper production processes to be able to drive out with CO2 to drive out the oil. And now those caverns can be used to store CO2. So blue ammonia is produced by using natural gas as the input and reforming it, and you wind up with hydrogen, which can then be put through the Fischer-Tropsch process in order to create fuel, ammonia that can be used in these engines. And the third stage third process for producing ammonia is green ammonia, which is the electrolysis of water splitting the oxygen apart from the hydrogen. So this is an intermediate step to be able to get to the hydrogen economy, which I think most professionals say is still about 10 years away. Ammonia engines for ammonia have already been in the research and development process, and they're now going to come online in about 2024. It takes about 2 years to build a plant to produce blue ammonia, or to produce ammonia through the blue method. So those lines will just about intersect, and the majors in the ammonia production process, like Yara in Norway and others, are slow to move to build more ammonia production plants. But the smaller operators, and you can think of these like the wildcatters in the West in the 1920s, 1930s, when they were drilling holes everywhere in Oklahoma and Pennsylvania and Texas and Louisiana and California. These are entrepreneurs who are taking the risk up front, and we're talking about business opportunities through the changes in climate and the changes in the energy mix that's needed. The risks are high, but the returns are extraordinarily high to acquire land, get the permits, get the EPC operators in place, and go into production of blue ammonia, which will probably be about a 10 to 15 year run until the economies of the Western economies, including Japan and Europe and the US, successfully transition their economies from fossil fuels to hydrogen fuels. So that's sort of an overview of what we're involved in right now. We're putting together the capital formation for a new company that's being formed by experienced operators who have completed about $250 billion worth of projects in 100 countries. The required capital is about $2 billion per project, and they'll be building 7 to 8 projects over the next 5 years. And that will be nowhere near enough to be able to satisfy the demand that's going to be coming online over the next 5 years. So you'll see a lot more ammonia plants probably being launched.
Thanks, John. I want to leave a little bit of time for questions because I'm sure the group has some questions. And I think Mark would tell you, don't do any of those too close to the Gulf. Make sure that they're inland a little bit.
Right.
One of the questions that I might have would be, there's all kinds of people. There's larger corporations here and we have small business opportunities. Is there anything specific that any four of you might consider as an answer to what do you think maybe top one or two opportunities for a small business to grab onto as far as an opportunity to have a business solution for what we're doing here? Because as I'm starting to understand, if we get that one vote, as soon as the carbon fee, if it trips, that opens up all kinds of business opportunities. If that's the case, what do you see potentially falling in line, or even without that, what innovations can happen now? So I see Mark has taken himself off mute, so have at it. Mark?
Was that a question to this Mark?
Yeah, to Mark, Bill, John, or John.
Okay, so I apologize. I was thinking you were talking to a different Mark, and so I wasn't paying full attention to the question. Please ask it again.
What one or two business opportunities, and in particular, if you've got them for small businesses, might there be for those listening and for those of us thinking about business innovation within this arena?
So in any of those areas around the change of technologies, actually, whether it's from fossil fuels to renewables and or hydrogen or ammonia. And actually, the reason I wasn't listening is because I was off researching or looking up on the web about using ammonia as a fuel source. The primary investors or those primary businesses are going to have to be large and huge investments, right? So that's not where small business is going to get involved. But there are a lot of support services in all of those technologies where small businesses can get involved. And so I'm even in the fossil fuel industries, there were a lot of support businesses dealing with sequestration and or the capture. Certainly within wind, there is maintaining the wind turbines themselves. And in solar, there's all the maintenance of that activity. And so I would look at kind of the peripheral things around those technologies for small businesses. And that's where I'd put my focus if I was a small business wanting to get involved in any of that. I assume that's going to be the case with ammonia as well, but I was just off researching that when you asked the question. I apologize.
John, did you have a thought? Go ahead.
I would add into that what Mark just said. I mean, if you take any industry that's out there, whether it's the internet or automobiles or healthcare, hospitals, there are a lot of those. Don't just sort of pop on the screen because you design it on a whiteboard. There's a lot of small businesses that are in fact, I think about 70 or 80% of GDP is driven by small businesses. People who produce the nuts and bolts and the gadgets and the widgets and maintain them that go into these large projects, whether it's shipping or transportation or whatever. I think Mark is frozen here. Maybe Mark wants to log off and sign back on or something.
Am I there now? Actually, you were frozen for a bit. So
okay.
Yeah,
okay.
So I agree. Actually, so in my later years in working, I was in the wind industry and would go to wind conferences. And at its peak, there were like 15,000 people that showed up to that conference. And there were maybe 5 major manufacturers of wind turbines. And there were probably 1,000 small businesses in and around the rest of that industry.
Yeah.
I've recently become involved with a company called Wealth VP, which puts large funders together with entrepreneurs and startup businesses to to be able to financially scale their businesses. And so I think that, getting hooked up with them or similar type organizations will help small businesses become large businesses.
Well, we should talk offline sometime, Bill.
What was that?
That's John.
John?
Yeah.
Okay, so a lot of new businesses are coming out of, for example, Arizona State University, which works very hard to take, graduate student ideas and bring them to scale to look for funding. So I would encourage young people who are in college and specifically ones who are working on these new technologies to seek out capital to grow their businesses.
Yeah, I would add to that. We are actually arranging the first 10 million in funding right now, step one, in a project that in 2 years will be a $2 billion project. So this is to organize the management company and get the contracts and the legal work in place and the EPC contractors to be able to get into the second stage. And I would consider that not necessarily a big business to be organizing a 10 million round for the launch of a new business, which eventually will become very big. And there must be many more opportunities like that for people who are at the smaller end. And when you're talking about big industry changes like this, you can get in at the big level. For example, equity investors who come into these projects would put 600 million to work and raise 1.4 billion in debt. And the banks and the big strategic investors, utilities and so forth are happy to come in with 600 million or 1.4 billion on the right risk return parameters. But at the smaller end, when these big projects are coming on, there are multiple opportunities to come in, like you're saying, Bill, to launch at the front end of businesses that are taking a big bite.
This is John Martinson. We're just on Bill's laptop.
Okay, John Martinson.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I want to make sure the two Johns connect after this. Any questions from the folks listening? Anyone want to come off mic and ask a question of any of the four gentlemen who spoke?
I have Gabriela. I have only a comment. John, I will contact you after. There's someone asking me for green hydrogen, and I didn't know. I'm not familiar with this, and I don't know if it's possible or not. John.
Okay, yeah, so John Cook, that would be him. I'm not seeing, Karen, what question you asked. You want to come off mic and ask it or make a comment?
Yeah, no, I just want to mention that's a business opportunity. It's not a question. That's why I just put in the chat that we do need to cap orphaned oil wells that are emitting a significant amount of emissions, and there is funds in the infrastructure bill.
Yeah,
So
I was on a Bloomberg Business Week Spaces this morning, and they were talking about just being able to capture the methane leaks would serve a huge gap that we have in fuel needs. So definitely an opportunity for things like that.
Yeah, it's a big opportunity.
Yeah, and I would say it's sort of the old venture capital opportunity. Venture capital and startups exist because you're solving a problem. You identify the problem and then you identify the solution and make a profit out of it. And just like capping leaks is a problem, it takes some intelligence to identify where the opportunities are in there and then figure out the solutions. There must be many, many, many of them. In fact, I think Thunderbird, the president of the CEO and dean of Thunderbird, Sanjeev Kagram, released a paper, I think together with ASU at the World Economic Forum about 2 years ago, where they identified the size of the business opportunity because of climate change to be something like $2 trillion worth of business opportunities, a massive number. I don't remember what it was, but you might go back and Google it or email Sanjeev Kagram and ask him for a copy of that. I think it's available on the website.
John, did you hear Gabriel's question about what is green hydrogen?
No, I thought I heard her say something about wind hydrogen, and I wasn't quite sure where that came from.
No, it was just what is green hydrogen?
Green hydrogen is producing a green hydrogen. I was going to talk about green ammonia. Green. Yeah, no, green hydrogen is produced by using entirely renewable sources for the electricity provided by renewable sources. And in the area of ammonia, it is the electrolysis process, which only consumes electricity put into the mix to be able to break apart the hydrogen from the water, from the hydrogen from the oxygen in H2O. But so that would be the answer.
Yeah, in water, and that's why it's green, because it's not coming from fossil
Yeah,
fuels.
That's right, and there's no CO2. But I am happy to say, Mark, that having heard your presentation, that any energy that's produced that does not add to the CO2 emissions in the world is good. I'm happy to say that what we're working on here with ammonia is good.
Excellent.
From that standpoint.
I was just gonna jump in and add, Citizens Climate Lobby is working on the advocacy part as far as legislation to help create a market signal. And the question about small businesses is that even if you're a small business, this market signal is a way to accelerate initiatives to become more efficient. Even if you were, say, in a small business, let's simplify it to a company that makes bread. If two companies that make the same type of bread and there's a carbon price in play, what it does is it creates the incentive for these businesses to compete in efficiency as an additional way that drives a acceleration away from fossil fuels, because small businesses, in order to be competitive with who they're competing against, the more efficient they can be with this market signal that is economy-wide, the more competitive they are with the other manufacturers. So there's, just by creating this price signal, it creates the incentive, regardless of the size of the business, to want to incorporate how they can be more efficient to be more competitive.
So are there any final questions or thoughts that anyone wants to add in here? Otherwise, I think we're good to go. I know I learned a lot, and hopefully everybody else did. Thanks again to the Global Chamber and Citizens Climate Lobby. And please go to the website, CCL?
Citizensclimatolobby.org.
To find out more about what they're doing and certainly how you can get involved. And of course, the Global Chamber has a website as well. Any final thoughts from anyone?
Very interesting. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gabrielle. It was great to meet all of you. Thank you. Stay safe and have a good rest of the day.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you, John, for staying up late.
Thank you, Doug.
So Doug did join.